Before cereal made it into our breakfast bowls, it spent decades as a fringe health food that no one would eat. What started as a sincere effort to get people to eat more fiber was quickly overthrown by the allure of sugar and the commercial power of marketing to children. This is the crazy story of cereal. Today's video is brought to you by Patreon. Now, I personally grew up in a cereal-free household. My parents were hippies and they would not allow me to eat anything that looked remotely fun. But if you grew up in the 90s like me, then you knew these guys. Tony the Tiger, Captain Crunch, Toucan Sam, seeing their stories on TV commercials, playing their games right on the box. You'd dig around in these things and you'd find prizes in there along with your breakfast cereal. If your family was cereal upper class, meaning that you had Fruit Loops, you wore it like a badge of honor, looking down in disgust on all those whole grain Wheaties kids. I'm the Wheaties kids. My parents thought that Cheerios were a sweet cereal. I'm still bitter about it. Little did I know at the time that I was living in the peak of cereal culture, but things have changed a lot since then. Now, cereal as we know it today is a product of the post-World War II industrialization phase. We're not going to get into that whole time period, but basically all the factories and industries that had popped up to serve the war effort were converted into factories for household products to keep the economy rolling. Production in America increased tenfold from 1940 to 1944, and many of the countries in the developed world wound up producing excess amounts of grain that they soon wouldn't know what to do with. So to deal with all that excess grain, the industry came together to find a way to get rid of all of it. And that's literally the only reason why cereal exists today. Of course, that's not completely true, but it sounded good, right? To get the full story, you have to combine the excess grain with the fact that America had a coast-to-coast railway system and that cereal had a very long shelf life. And that meant that cereal would become a national phenomenon.
Yes, Kellogg's for breakfast. No better way to start the day. It's smiling food. It's good for you. Start you off with a whoop-de-doo.
But here's the other thing. People wanted to eat cereal for breakfast. The war led to a change in household dynamics that made convenience king. The 9-to-5 workday took off and more women were working outside of the home. Breakfast was crunch time. Plus, this is the baby boom era, so there weren't just one or two little mouths to feed, there were lots of little mouths to feed. People needed something quick to start the day and get those kids out of the house. And that thing was cereal. Oh, and then there was just like the one other thing that really helped cereal become popular, which was marketing directed really specifically at children, but we're gonna get back to that in a second because we have to get into something actually way crazier that I honestly didn't even believe when we read this. So on this channel, we produce a lot of content criticizing brands and companies, which makes it a little harder for us to get sponsored by brands and companies. So that's why we have launched a Patreon. On that page, we have full-length dedicated video podcasts where we break down different brands and companies and different highlights and headlines in the news relating to the products that you buy and enjoy every single day. So if you're interested in getting some bonus content over there, consider supporting us on Patreon. Back in the 1800s, cereal, or more specifically cornflakes, was invented by OG wellness guru Dr. John Kellogg. Before this post-war boom, cereal was kind of a big deal in, weirdly enough, religious communities. Cornflakes were originally invented as a digestive aid. It turns out that there is a lot of Christian theological debates about poop, whether or not it's moral to poop, whether or not Jesus pooped, and whatnot. So before we get going forward, everyone poops. Just so we're super clear on that one. Everybody poops. So Dr. John Kellogg, inventor of cornflakes, ran something called a medical spa or a sanatorium. Supposedly, it's a place where you go to stay and get specialized treatment for things like tuberculosis and other stuff like that, but it honestly just kind of sells like a Christian jail with lots of forced bed rest and going to church. But anyway, the point is, this was the era when it was chill to just do experiments on people without ethical committees' approval or anything like that, and Kellogg was passionate about extremely clean bowels. He wanted people to poop 4 or 5 times a day, just like gorillas. That was literally his goal, pooping as much as a gorilla. So he f***ed around and found out in the kitchen, and voila, cornflakes, a high-fiber digestive aid that will move your bowels as much as the Holy Spirit moves your soul. This whole story I find so wonderful, that we're eating cornflakes today, unironically, even though they were invented for poop purposes. It's just fascinating. But now Kellogg's younger brother saw an opportunity here. He added a bunch of sugar to the box and then threw in a toy, started marketing them as Frosted Flakes for children. And now you're starting to see where we're going, right? So what happens when the cereal moguls meet the post-World War II industrial food system? Well, from the 1940s to the 1970s, more and more sugary cereal flavors appealing to kiddos appeared on grocery store shelves, specifically the lower child height shelves. Elaborate cartoon commercials were basically soap operas for children. These ads were literally designed by the same makers of Rocky and Bullwinkle and George of the Jungle, complete with character arcs and storylines, ensuring the kids were emotionally invested in the mascots. Even crazier, the boxes on the lower shelf were designed so that the mascots were looking down at just the right angle to make eye contact with 2.5 foot tall grocery shoppers. And then you throw a freaking prize in the box too? Free toys with breakfast? Come on, baby! You can see why I was so depressed as a kid having to eat those freaking bricks of crunchy, shredded strands of brown shit. Now, by the time we hit peak cereal in the 80s and 90s, it was basically a cartoon empire. Mr. T pitied the fool who didn't eat his corn teas. Sports role model Tony the Tiger could bring out the tiger in you. Your favorite Looney Tunes characters were making cameos. Cereal commercials were basically television shows for kids. The ultimate place for heroes and villains to duke it out in the name of a balanced and nutritional breakfast.
He's stealing all the honey. All the honey, not Cheerios. Oh no, we gotta get it back.
But now listen, whether or not marketing to children is ethical, it's not. It worked. Americans are buying 2.7 billion packages of breakfast cereal a year, and the cereal industry is going through 800 million pounds of sugar in that same time frame. Now, those numbers are so big they don't even fit on a calculator back then, but today we've done some long division and we can tell you that that's about 30% sugar content. Now, even though Big Cereal was definitely in cahoots with Big Sugar, in the early 2000s, we saw a rise in health consciousness that changed the industry forever. Basically, this is when like 90s kids grew into the health conscious millennials that we are today. Cue the Battle of the Virtuous Cereal campaign. And this is around the time when we see Kellogg's acquisition of Kashi, the cereal that looks like you're eating a bowl of hamster pellets. Natural and organic cereals exploded, and Cheerios raked in more than everyone else, worth $1 billion USD in 2015. More and more emphasis was placed on healthy terms like fortified, high in fiber and protein, and low sugar, calling into question whether or not Reese's Puffs were really ever a part of that nutritious breakfast.
And Reese's Puffs are part of a good breakfast.
But dude, like for real, those Reese's Puffs, dude, the chocolate and the peanut butter balls would make like a soup. Because I don't even want to say chocolate milk because it was thicker than that. Like there was so much sugar in that sludge with the puffs on the top that like you felt like a different person after you finished a bowl of those. Today, there are even online guides that help consumers identify which cereals are healthy, but even then, I'm not so sure. 3 grams of protein makes a cereal healthy? We're supposed to get like 45 to 50 grams of protein a day, so if you're eating grape nuts for breakfast, you better be eating something way more substantial for lunch and dinner. I don't know what the truth is, but as a millennial, I'm just gonna say that cereal was the coolest that it ever was when I was a kid, and it's been on the decline ever since. But even if it's been on the decline, nostalgia is definitely in. From the Barbie movie to the new Little Mermaid, Indiana Jones, the Beanie Baby documentary, and more, it only makes sense that there is this new cereal genre coming out, targeting millennials who miss being a kid, right?
I wish I could go back to the 90s.
But this time, there's There's no sugar involved. Probably the new and biggest face in this game is Magic Spoon. You've probably seen them sponsoring stuff here on YouTube. They like to talk a lot about how they're merging the health factor and the yum factor. They make all the predictable flavors that you used to love, right? But with more vague names. They got fruity, cocoa, frosted, cinnamon roll, and probably a bunch more like birthday cake or something. But names and marketing aside, this is where they have placed all of their eggs, in one giant health-based basket. These cereals are high in protein, 12 to 14 grams per bowl, keto-friendly, because millennials love keto stuff, gluten-free, grain-free, and sugar-free. Grain-free cereal? That was a question I had too. Yeah, apparently. How do they do this? It's not great. Magic Spoon is basically just a protein shake in pellet form. The main ingredient is milk protein blend, followed by sweetener blend and an oil blend, which is just a little too much blend for me. The main sweetener, allulose, is technically naturally occurring in fructose, but in very small amounts, so generally when we eat it, it's from a lab. Which isn't to say that it isn't inherently unhealthy, but the research shows that our bodies literally can't absorb any of it, so it doesn't contribute to our caloric intake. This is why it makes sweet food while being still technically sugar-free, because you're literally just pooping it out. And I don't think that this is the shit show that Mr. Kellogg was looking for when he got into this. Now, the FDA says that it's generally recognized as safe, but it isn't actually an approved food in Canada or Europe. So that's a little important to keep in mind. And finally, the kicker, it costs about 5 times as much as regular cereal. A box of Magic Spoon is going to set you back at least $10, and you're not even getting that much of it. One serving size is only 1/3 of a cup, so we're talking like 50 cents a spoonful, depending on how big your spoon is. Yeah, sure, it's sugar-free and low carb, but research shows that lowering the amount of something like an ingredient in a food doesn't actually improve your overall health. Our bodies are just little human systems that like being in a certain equilibrium, and we kind of just auto-correct to whatever the balance is that we're used to. And this is the thing that this whole cereal world missed from the very beginning. Whether it's eating a protein shake keto pellet in the morning or your Reese's Pieces Puffs in your soup, the reality is you probably just shouldn't be eating cereal for breakfast. Research shows that the most important thing about breakfast is really just eating it at a consistent time every day, because it tells your body that you're awake, and who doesn't need a little bit of help waking up in the morning?
I'm too tired.
So if cornflakes is gonna do that for you, then I guess that's okay, but maybe eat something that didn't come out of a box instead. Hopefully this video was interesting for you. If you did enjoy it, remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Cereal, baby.